We can probably all agree that the film of today is not perfect, but we can only be grateful for this, as there, in the imperfect, is a chance of development. The imperfect is alive, the perfect is dead, pushed aside. We do not see it, but 1,000 possibilities are open for the imperfect. Film as an art stands in an era of struggle, and one is looking around to see where the new impulses will be coming from. You naturally now expect a long, profound lecture with learned analysis and all that, but I'll have to disappoint you. I'm not a film theorist. I'm only a film director and proud of my craft. But a craftsman too will get his own ideas during his work, and I would like to share these simple thoughts with you. I do not have anything revolutionary to say. I do not believe in revolutions. They very often push development backwards. I am more inclined to believe in evolution, in the small steps forward. So I only intend to point out that the film has possibilities of giving an artistic renewal from inside. Human beings follow the principle of inertia and are opposed to be taken away from the beaten track. They have by now got used to the correct photographic reproduction of reality and surely feel a certain happiness in recognizing what they already know. When the camera appeared, it won a quick victory because it in a mechanical way and objectively could register the impressions which the human eye sees. This capacity has so far been the strength of the film, but as regards artistic films, it is becoming a weakness we have to fight. We have got stuck with photography and are now confronted with the necessity of freeing ourselves from it. We must use the camera to drive away the camera. We must work so that we are no longer slaves of photography, but make ourselves masters of it. From being a purely reporting medium, photography should be turned into a tool for artistic inspiration, and direct observation be left to the sightseeing of film use. Photography as a means of reporting has compelled the film to stand with its feet on the ground, and so it became addicted to naturalism. Not until the film has cut off its earth connection will be able to fly into the sphere of imagination. So we have to wrench the film out of the embrace of naturalism. We have to define to ourselves that it is a waste of time to copy reality. By means of the camera, we must give the film a new language of style and create a new artistic form. But first of all, we have to understand what we mean by the terms art and style. The Danish author Johannes V. Jensen characterizes art as a spiritually interpreted form, and this can probably not be said any better. The British philosopher Chesterfield thinks that style is the dress of thoughts. This definition is also simple and precise, presumed that the dress is not too conspicuous, as a characteristic of a good style must be that it enters such an intimate contact with the material that it forms a synthesis. If it is pushing so as to attract all attention, it is no longer style, but mannerism. I myself would define style as the form in which artistic inspiration expresses itself, because we recognize the style of an artist on certain features which are characteristic for him, and which reflect his mentality and personality in his work. The style of an artistic film is a resultant of many different components, such as the playing of rhythms and lines, the mutual tension of the color surfaces, the interaction of light and shadow, the gliding rhythm of the camera. All this, which, combined with the director's conception of the material as a picture creative factor, will decide his artistic form of expression, his style. If he confines himself to give a soulless, impersonal photography of what his eyes can perceive, he has no style. But if he uses his own mind to transform what his eyes had seen into a vision, and if he builds up his film in accordance with his vision, disregarding the reality which inspired him, then his work will bear the sacred stamp of inspiration, and then the film has a style, because style is the stamp of a personality put on a work. The director is the man who must and shall leave his hallmark on the artistic film. This does not mean an under-evaluation of the poet's share, but even if the poet is a Shakespeare, the literary idea in itself will not make the film a piece of art. This can only happen if the director, inspired by the poet's material in a convincing manner, gives it life in artistic pictures. I do not underestimate the teamwork made by photographers, color technicians, and art directors, and so on. But inside this collective, the director will be, has to, and shall remain the prime and inspiring power, the man behind the work, the one who makes the poet's work sound so that we listen, the one who makes feelings and passions flare, that we are moved and touched. He is the one who puts his stamp on the film with this inexplicable something called style. This is my conception of the director's importance and responsibility. We know now what film style is, but we would also like to know what an artistic film is. Let us formulate the question this way: what other art form is most closely related to films? In my opinion, it must be architecture, which is the most perfect art form, as it is not an imitation of nature, but has sprung out direct from human imagination. The characteristic of noble architecture is that all details are so finely harmonized as to fit in with the whole, so that no small detail, however small it may be, can be changed without giving the impression of a flaw in the harmony, contrary to the non-architectural house, where all measures and all proportions are haphazard. Something similar applies to the films. Only when all artistic elements of a film have been welded together to form such a firm composition that none of its units can be left out or changed without damaging the whole, only then can the film be compared to an architectural piece of art. And all those films which do not satisfy these strict demands are but boring and conventional houses which we'll pass by without even noticing them. In the architectural film, the director will take over the role of the architect. He is the one who, from his artistic outlook on life, coordinates the many different rhythms and tensions with the dramatic curves of the poem and with the psychological modulations in the actor's expressions and gestures, and thereby imprints his style on the film. And now we are coming to the crucial point. Where is the possibility for an artistic renewal of the film? I can only answer for myself and see but one way, the abstraction. And in order not to be misunderstood, I shall hurry up and give you a definition of the word abstraction as the expression of an art conception which demands that the artist shall abstract himself from reality, so as to strengthen the spiritual contents, whether these are of psychological or purely aesthetic nature. Or to put it even more concise, the art must describe inner and not outward life. We have to get away from naturalism and find ways and means to introduce the abstract in our pictures. The capability to abstract is the presumption for all artistic creation. The abstraction gives the director a chance of getting outside the fence which, with naturalism, has surrounded the film. An ambitious director must look for a higher reality than the one he can obtain by merely placing his camera somewhere and make photos of the reality. His pictures shall not merely be visual, but spiritual. The director must share his own artistic and spiritual experiences with the audience, and abstraction will give him a chance doing it, as the director replaces the objective reality with his own subjective interpretation. But if abstraction is to be introduced in the film, we must try to find new creative principles. I would like to stress here that I today merely think of the picture. This is quite reasonable, as people think in pictures, and the picture is the primary factor in a film. I want to point out some of the roads open to the director who wants to introduce the abstract element in his pictures. The one closest at hand is called simplification. Every creative artist is confronted with the same task, to be inspired by reality and then move away from it in order to give his work the form the inspiration provoked. The director must therefore be free to transform reality so that it becomes consistent with the inspired, simplified picture left in his mind. Because the director's aesthetic sense must not give way to reality. On the contrary, reality must obey his aesthetic sense. Art is not reproduction, but subjective choice, and the director will therefore only pick out what he deems necessary to get a clear and spontaneous general effect. The simplification may also aim at making the idea of the picture more evident and striking. The simplification must then aim at cleansing the motif of all the elements which do not support the idea. But with this simplification, the motif is transformed into a symbol, and with symbolism, we are well on our way towards abstraction, as the idea of symbolism is to work through suggestions. The filmic reproduction of reality must be true, but cleansed of unimportant details. It must also be realistic, but transformed in the director's mind so as to become poetry. The director shall not be interested in the reality of the things, but in the spirit in and behind the things. Realism as such is not an art. Realities must be forced into a form of simplification and abbreviation, and in a purified form emerge in a kind of timeless psychological realism. This abstraction, through simplification and inspiration of the subject matter, can be practiced by the director under modest forms in the rooms of the films. How many rooms without souls haven't we seen on the screen? The director may give his rooms a soul through simplification by removing all superfluous matters for the benefit of a few articles which in one way or other are of value as psychological witness of the personality of the inmate, or as a characteristic feature showing his relation to the idea of the film. Colors, of course, are so much more important means to obtain abstraction. Everything is possible with colors. However, not until it has been possible to break the chain which still binds the color film to the photographic naturalism of the black-white film. In the same way as the French Impressionists were inspired by the classical Japanese woodcut artist, there's every reason for Western film directors to learn from the Japanese film Hell's Gate, where the colors actually fulfill their purpose. I am inclined to believe that the Japanese themselves consider this film as a naturalistic film, true enough with historical costumes, but still naturalistic. Seen with our eyes, it seemed like a style film with a tendency towards the abstract. Only in a single scene does pure naturalism break through altogether, namely in the scene with the tournament in the open green plain. The style is broken for a few minutes, but the feeling of uneasiness is quickly forgotten over the beauties which the rest of the film gives us. The colors have undoubtedly been chosen according to a well-prepared plan. This film tells us at least a lot, not only as regards color composition and the rhythm, which is so well known from the classical Japanese woodcuts, but also about the constellation of warm and cool colors and about the use of deep-going simplification, which is the more striking here because it is supported by the colors. Hell's Gate should encourage Western directors to use the colors more deliberately and with greater boldness and imagination. So far, the colors in most Western films have been used much too casually and according to a naturalistic recipe. We are at present moving on cat's paws. When getting real wild, we will throw about with pastel colors, pink and light blue, in order to prove that we at least have some taste. But as far as the abstract film goes, it will not be enough to have taste. Artistic intuition and courage is needed to select and compose contrasting colors, which will back up the dramatic and psychological contents of the film. The colors offer the greatest possibility of renewing the artistic resources of the film, and it is a pity that color films have existed for 20 years, and during this period of 20 years we can remember 3 or 4 films only whose colors gave us an aesthetic experience. And the best one came from Japan. While speaking about colors, which in themselves hold unlimited possibilities for abstraction, there's one more factor worth mentioning, because it may inspire to abstraction of a very special character. Photography presumes, as you know, an atmospheric perspective, and this means that light and shadow fade towards the background. There may be an idea there to obtain an interesting abstraction by deliberately eliminating the atmospheric perspective, or, in other words, give up the so much desired depth and distance effect. One should instead work towards an entirely new picture structure of color surfaces, all in the same plan, so that they formed one big many-colored surface in one, so as to eliminate the conception of foreground, middle distance, and background. In other words, get away from the picture with a perspective and adopt a pure surface effect. It is possible that very remarkable aesthetic effects could be obtained in this way, probably well suited for films. I hope I did not make you feel worried because I talk so much about abstraction. It may sound like a naughty word in the ears of film people. What I wanted to say today was merely to point out that there is a world outside the grey and boring naturalism, namely the world of imagination. This transformation must of course be made without the director or his helpers losing their hold in the world of realities. Even if the director must remodel the world of reality to his artistic form, this changed reality must be presented in such a way that the audience will recognize it and believe in it. It is very important that the first attempts to introduce abstraction in the film are made with tact and discretion, so that they do not shock people. It would be wise slowly to lead the audience into new roads. But should the attempts prove successful, then enormous prospects open up for the film. No task would be too high. The film may never become real three-dimensional, but by means of this abstraction, it may, on the other hand, be possible to introduce both a fourth and a fifth dimension in the film. Now, lastly, I have talked so much about picture and form and not a word about acting, but anyone will know how much importance I attach to the actor's performance. Nothing in the world can be compared to the human face, a land which one can never tire of exploring, a land with a beauty of its own, be it rough or mild. In fact, there is no greater experience than in a studio to witness how the expression of a sensitive face under the mysterious power of inspiration is animated from inside and turns into poetry.